This is PT World. I'm Syed Shabahat Ali and you're watching Fault Lines. While there are many problems in the world that we reside, a major problem is climate change. Climate change that was primarily discussed in theories is now getting more evident. Every winter is getting harsher. Every summer is becoming more and more hotter. The rainfalls are not predicted. Flash floods are sweeping away populations. And what we get in return from the global leaders are hollow statements and empty promises. Unfortunately, our population has tripled during last 70 years, and we have given enough damage to the climate around us. Prolonged droughts, unprecedented rains, rising sea level are the phenomenal problems that we are facing today. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
The devastating heat wave that has gripped South Asia, home to nearly a quarter of the world's population, was consequence of climate change and is a glimpse of the region's future. A recent study by the World Weather Attribution Group suggests that current level of global warming created by human-induced climate change has made these heat waves 30 times more likely. The impact of climate change has been cascading and widespread, such as melting glaciers in Pakistan, sending floods downstream. The early heat scorched wheat crops in India, forcing it to ban exports to nations reeling from food shortages due to Ukraine conflict. The increasing volatility in weather patterns means a greater risk of disasters and severe economic damage for the countries already straining to increase growth and development and to move past the pandemic's devastation to lives and livelihoods. Pakistan is grappling with massive forest fires amid record-breaking temperatures and severe heat wave. One of the worst affected areas was Balochistan, where deadly fires have destroyed nearly 40% of the trees in the pine forest of Koh-e-Suleiman range, according to local estimates. The latest Forest Department report says that over 200 wildfires have been reported in KP, mainly in Swat, Shangla and Banner district. The climate-induced devastation underscores the need for the world to not just combat climate change by cutting down greenhouse gas emissions, but also to adapt its harmful effects as quickly as possible.
To talk about this very important issue, my first guest in the program is today Dr. Shaukat Ali. He is PhD in climate change and an expert of the subject. Dr. Shaukat, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you.
So primarily when we talk about the climate crisis, as I was saying in the introduction of program, there are a host of issues that we talk about. Can you kindly explain or list down the issues that are most significant ones when we talk about the global climate change?
The most significant issue nowadays in the world is the increased concentration of greenhouse gases. The sun energy that is coming to the earth is very balanced in this universe, and this energy is, after hitting the earth, it causes to warm the earth. And when it's go big, the greenhouse gases trap this energy, and the trapping of this energy is more than 300. And day by day, this energy is increasing, and due to these trapping. And if in the same rate, this trapping is increased, so this will affect the temperature first, the earth temperature that is increasing in very high rates. Then the precipitation pattern is getting changing around the world. In some places we will observe very high precipitation, extreme events, but in some places we will get droughts events. And with this, the extreme event phenomena is very nowadays very common. And in some places, like a few days ago, I was asking one of the scientists in Brazil that what is the your country issue. She told me that cold wave is the issue of their country. So the extreme events, these phenomena will be going on, and the sea level rise, glacier melting, and the most important thing that will happen due to these climatic changes is the effect on human health. And climate change is now not more the issue of only changes in temperature and precipitation, but it's a health emergency issue.
Doctor, we talk about the health later, but as you rightly pointed out, these greenhouse gases are primarily responsible for the Earth's temperature to rise. And not only we are seeing every May or every June getting hotter than the previous May or June, but also the fact that the summers are now falling slightly earlier than before, and the span of the weathers have also changed. Has it got something to do with the climate change?
Yeah, this is the reason of climate change, because when the average temperature getting increased, especially if we talk the average temperature according to the IPCC, how we calculate these as a scientist, let me tell you that how we calculate these temperatures. We using climate model, just like a doctor, when a doctor checks some patient, that what is the temperature of that patient, similarly we check the temperature of the earth through climate models. So the climate models was introduced by IPCC, that is the governmental panel on climate change internationally, and the developed country run those models on a supercomputer, and those models calculate that in 21st century the average temperature of the earth will be increased with the high emission scenario around 4 degrees, but in Pakistan it will increase 5 degrees. Similarly, the 1.5 and 2 degree Paris Agreement targets, that is, if it is reached in 2036 in the world, in Pakistan it will reach 10 years earlier. So this is the very alarming situation.
You're saying that
especially
Pakistan will get 1.5 degree hotter by 2026 instead of 2036.
Pakistan got 1.5 degree increase according to our research, according to our paper in 2016 in the high emission scenario. So Pakistan is getting hotter 10 years earlier than the global average. And these things we calculated on our climate models. And the international community is putting a lot of efforts on these climate models, that how we can improve these climate model and how we can communicate our results to the policies, that policy acts on it. And the international conferences, the COP 26 that recently happened, so they are based actually on these climate models.
But Dr. Saab, when we talk about these conferences, I mean every 1 or 2 years a major conference takes place. There are pledges and commitments given by the richer nations. There are targets given to the rest of the world. There are targets given to countries like India, like China, the countries that are contributing more, and United States that are contributing more to the pollution. But then there are follow-ups made, and that gave us quite a dismal situation. We do not see the commitments being fulfilled by the global leaders, and as said by one of the experts, there are hollow promises and empty statements. Would you agree with the statement that I just said?
This is very unfortunate that the developing country is not fulfilling their commitments. But after Paris agreements, there are some improvements. And now in the last conference that was happened in Glasgow, COP 26, there were major 4 objectives, but 2 of them are very important. One is net zero emission policy, that how those countries will decrease their emission and how they will go to the net zero emission. And the second important thing was how the finance will be distributed. And they reached up to some point that they are making that how these finance can be reached to the developing country or the most affected country like Pakistan. And one important thing I am telling you, that in health sector, in COP 26, first time, this time was health pavilion in that COP 26 meeting, and they allocated some funds, and they come with 5 different objectives. So the health sector in Pakistan should be prepared for these funds.
Now since you have said this for the second time during our limited conversation so far, help me to connect health emergency with climate change. My knowledge doesn't connect the 2 dots. How integrated these 2 separate phenomena are?
Yeah, there are 2 ways to connect. One is direct and one is indirect effect. The direct effect, I will give you the example of heat wave. The temperature increases, and these temperature increase direct effect on heat wave, and this heat wave affect your human health. So in heat wave, as we seen like recently, this was a dry heat wave. Dry heat wave means that there was no humidity outside. in the atmosphere. So in the dry heat wave, your body go for sweating, because when outside temperature increases, your human is a warm-blooded animal. So when your body temperature increases with the outer temperature, so your body try to cool it down, and it's go for sweating. So due to more sweating, you got some dehydration. But if outside there is a humidity, and then your body go for the sweating, so it don't sweat, and it increase your temperature. Like from 37 normal temperature, it's go 38, 39, and when it reach to 40, then it's alarming for human body, because your heart attack can be occur, your lungs can be damaged, your mind can be unconscious.
So because of the increase in heat and because of the difference in the temperature that we are getting every year, human bodies are more likely to fall sick, and which will give birth to an emergency of health crisis.
This is direct effect. The indirect effect, if you take the case of dengue, so the alteration in the dengue mosquitoes causing the spread of dengue, I have my own research on it, that what we calculated, that the dengue cases will be spread like in the area where we don't have the dengue cases right now. It is spread to the north region, because the temperature increase in the north region is increasing according to the IPCC report. So there they will provide a suitable condition. And another point is, with temperature, the dengue also need a suitable condition for precipitation, because they need clean water. So the precipitation is increasing in the north region, and it's decreasing in the southern part of Pakistan according to our research. So
now,
this is also,
Dr. Sab, since we have spoken about Pakistan at length, let's go back to the international canvas, which is quite large. And we are seeing that the droughts are increasing phenomenally in the world. While I was preparing for this program, I went through a few reports, and the reports tell me that in Brazil, the current drought is one of the worst ever recorded. The coffee production is affected by 23%. I'm giving you the figures, and then we'll take your expert opinion on it. It also says that United Nations has estimated that drought is affecting 1.5 billion people, and coupled with the crisis that we have today in the world, the Ukraine-Russia war, this is becoming a major reason of the food shortage to come. Africa is also, sub-Saharan Africa is also facing one of the worst famines of recent history. We have the similar phenomena in Afghanistan as well. So tell me why these all famines and droughts are coming together. Normally it didn't happen, it didn't used to be like that. So why it is happening all together in all the continents?
I agree the things that you have mentioned. There will be extreme events. So drought is one of the extreme event. But in some part, in these parts, maybe this year it happened. But according to the CC phenomena, that is the one of the index of climate change, when there is increase in temperature, there will be increase in evaporation, and this evaporation will cause raining. But the raining will not at the same place. Like if there is evaporation in Pakistan, so it will not necessarily that it will rain in the same place, because the wind carry away to a next location. So this place will face drought, but the other place will like observe the extreme raining. If I give you the example of Pakistan, even it's a small country, not very small, but as compared to Russia or Canada or USA. So in Pakistan, in a southern side, we will face drought, because our model shows that there will be 30% decrease in the precipitation. But if we go to the north side of Pakistan, our model says that there will be more than 70% increase in precipitation. So in this side it will be drought condition, but on another side there will be extreme events of precipitation. And if the melting of the glacier and ice melting, it's joined as a compound event, so it will cause flash flood in the region.
Now, as you have pointed out, flood again serve to be one of the most surprising phenomena. We are facing flash floods one after another. We had a sweeping flood in China last year. Right now, when we are doing this program here, many districts in India and Bangladesh are under an immense flood. Pakistan also faced some of the worst floods in our recent history. In 2010 floods, we lost almost an entire province went under the swamp of water. Tell me why these floods are increasing. Is it only because of immense rains that we are having, or is it also associated with the melting of glaciers that you pointed out in the first part of your conversation?
As I mentioned, that when the energy of this universe is increased, so this energy increase, this energy will affect all the atmospheric systems. Like in the upper atmosphere, we have jet streams. These are the winds that causes, like if I give you the example of the recent heat wave, it was affected by three phenomena. One is less rain and less cloud, the other one due to jet stream, and the third one is La Nina. So La Nina this year affect less raining in Pakistan in winter, but now this La Nina, because it's delayed, so it causes more raining in Pakistan now, or the flooding that is causing maybe this event that recently happened. So the extreme event will be increasing. If either it's a high temperature heat wave or it's a flooding, because of the energy changing in the universe, it will disturb all the system.
And wildfires are also becoming quite rampant, and not only around the world. We saw Australia's wildfire that was ever worst in its history. We saw Amazon's wildfire. Amazon is again, by the way, under fire. Some part of California were under immense fire. And this time in Pakistan, the wildfires are almost everywhere. There are more than 21 cases alone in the KP's province. Why wildfires are becoming so rampant? Is it also associated with the climate change?
In many reports, they show that it's associated, and they give the three basic driver for the this wildfire. The first one is oxygen. The second one is fuel, that is the dry wood or the surface, or dry or the grasses, and the third thing is the temperature. So temperature is already going to be high due to this phenomena. The second thing, that the recent heat wave, what it causes, because if the humidity is 3% before, so due to these high heat wave events, the evaporation is high, like maybe 7%, double of the previous. So due to this, the surface and the grasses and even the trees become dry. So it provides a suitable condition for getting a fire.
This is the reason why. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being guest in our program. Ladies and gentlemen, he's just rightly listed out all the major reasons why we should be more concerned about the climate issues, particularly in Pakistan. As he pointed out, Pakistan has got 1.5 degree warmer, 10 years ahead of the rest of the world, and it is becoming one of the major reasons why we are facing such harsh climate conditions. We'll take a break here and we'll join you back with the second segment of program. Stay with us. Welcome back. The economic situation of the world has started becoming more bleaker than ever before, at least in the memory of the current generation. We have seen the downtimes of economies. We have seen the downtime of 2008, but this time, ever since COVID crisis has hit the world, and then one phenomena after another started playing their role in making Pakistan and generally and the entire world more prone to the economic crisis. At the moment, the world is facing one of the worst inflation hits of the recent history. The stock markets are crashing from around the world. Oil prices are going higher. People are facing many difficulties in buying the products that they need or the commodities that they need for their daily life. All of this coupled together is becoming or taking the shape of an economic recession. It is very important to point out that there are many countries now that are under the immense debt of international loans, and some of these countries are unable to pay off these debts. We recently saw example of Sri Lanka. There is another upcoming case of Laos, which according to World Bank reports is another country which would not be able to pay back its loans. Russia is also facing serious economic challenges, and then there are many sub-Saharan countries of Africa that are undergoing an acute shortage of food as well as facing inflation. We have invited a renowned economist, Dr. Kasir Bengali, to the program to address all these major issues and to teach us a bit on that. Dr. Saab, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Subhash.
Such a privilege to have you in my show, sir. To start with, tell us about this global inflation that the world is facing at the moment. What do you believe is primarily has triggered these crises of inflation?
I think the basis of this economic crisis today goes back to 2-3 years. The COVID played a major role in destabilizing the economy. And then as the world was recovering from COVID came the Ukraine war, and the sanctions that the West has put on Russia, the blockade of Ukrainian ports, which does not allow its wheat to be exported. These have all combined to create a very major economic crisis. The decision by Europe not to buy Russian oil means they have to get in energy from other sources, which is more expensive. And as energy cost goes up for Europe, it certainly feeds into recession. So there is a worldwide phenomena going on in terms of economic crisis, but Pakistan has been hit harder because we were already in a crisis, even before COVID. So for us, it's compounding the crisis.
But Dr. I was trying to understand it from a technical perspective. So what exactly has happened? Due to the COVID crisis or the supply chain issues, have the countries decided to print more currency or what exactly? Why this inflation came?
See, inflation, there are two sources of inflation. One is the supply side and the other is the demand side. The supply side inflation occurs when your cost of producing a product goes up. If your cost goes up from 100 rupees to 110 rupees, you will obviously increase its price in the market. You will not sell at a loss. So the other is demand side inflation. The price of the cost of producing that product is the same, but there is more demand for it. There are more hands that are asking for that product. So it turns into some kind of an auction house. Whoever bids more gets the product, and that raises the price. What is happening worldwide today is largely supply side inflation. But during COVID, we also created the basis of demand side inflation. All countries, including the United States, printed money to provide welfare payments to its people. And that, of course, means there's a lot of money floating around the economy, and there is greater demand for products than supply. Supply chains were also affected because of lockdowns across the world. There were many important products that were not being produced. For example, computer chips was not being manufactured and supplied. So that affected a whole range of products, including automobiles and other that depends on sensor technology. So there was a supply side bottleneck of commodities because of COVID lockdown. And at the same time, governments were printing money. It also created the demand side inflation. And this has now combined with the Ukraine war, with wheat in particular in short supply because Russia and Ukraine together supplied 1/3 of the world demand for wheat. So wheat prices have gone up. And so we have inflation from the supply side and the demand side both.
Got your point. Dr. Kaisar Sahab, now going forward, help me to understand how long normally or generally a cycle of inflation goes on. We have seen similar crises in 2008 that had triggered panic in all the stock markets. Pakistan's stock market fell to the ever lowest. How long normally or generally such a period of recession normally stays?
2008 was nothing compared to what we are facing today. I think what we are facing today can be compared to the mid 70s when oil prices tripled in a matter of days. That created a recession around the world. It had a very major impact. It pushed inflation in Pakistan to between 20% plus, even close to 30%. So what we are facing today is somewhat akin to the mid 70s. The oil price shock took place in 1973. And then for the next 3-4 years, the world was reeling under that oil price shock, including Pakistan. That is what we are facing today. It depends how long this will take because a number of factors. First of all, if the Ukraine war ends and the sanctions against Russia also end, that of course releases a lot of commodities that have to move around the world. The money that has been created and is floating around in the economy, that can be controlled by monetary policy measures, raising interest rates and so on, which of course most governments are doing. But that takes time. There's a lag effect, what we call that if you take a policy decision today, it will have its impact maybe 3 months, 6 months, or even 1 year later. There's a lag to the impact for the effect to set in. I think if all the right measures are taken, it might still take a year or two before this economic crisis it appears to be sort of that you're managing to control it.
I can certainly understand that there are many external factors that you're pointing out. But Doctor, one more important thing, and I needed someone like you to respond to it. There is a increasing debt crisis as well. Countries are borrowing more loan. They have already borrowed far more than they can pay back, and this includes countries like United States, countries like Japan. Japanese yen is under pressure because of the excessive money that they have borrowed. And now there are a number of countries that are facing serious challenges in paying back this money. Don't you believe there is another debt storm in making? And if a number of countries start to fail, fail in paying back this money, this may just exacerbate the crisis further.
Yes, I think there is a major debt crisis which arises out of, is a byproduct of the current economic crisis that we are facing. But you see, different countries, the background of the debt crisis for different countries are different. There are some countries which are facing temporary cash flow problems. That because commodity prices, if there is a raw material producing, a country that is producing, say, copper or other raw materials, if its price drops, then suddenly the country which heavily relies on the export revenues from that product runs out of money. And it's a temporary crisis. Many countries are facing a debt crisis which is temporary. But there are countries which are facing a debt crisis which is structural. Sri Lanka is one of them, Lebanon is another, and Pakistan is certainly one of them. And if I may talk about Pakistan, we have been living off debt for the last 20 years. And to the extent that now we have reached a point where all the loan that we take is only designed to repay past loans. We don't take any loans for any development projects. So, and we opened, and another factor that for developed countries also is the neoliberal globalization model, where everything is to be open, everything is to be free, and there are no controls on international trade or capital flows. And this is also creating a problem, and the entire world, including the developed world, is now taking measures to bring in controls. This freewheeling neoliberal globalization model has run its course. It has been very damaging, and in Pakistan also. For example, in Pakistan, we have no controls over who can produce what in agriculture. So if the farmer finds the price of sugarcane better, they will cut out wheat and produce sugarcane. Now, that is the globalization model. But there are countries which have ensured that, and Saudi Arabia is one of them, that they will produce their own wheat to the extent of their own requirement, no matter what international prices are and what comparative advantage is. We have not done so. We import 90% of our pulses. We import almost 100% of our raw material for cooking oil. Now, we have to move away from this globalization model and make sure that a minimum acreage is allocated for production of basic food items. When you do that, then you protect the population from international price volatility. International prices can go up and down, but our population will be protected because we produce our own wheat and pulses and cooking oil materials, which are basically what is the basic food that we need.
If I understood you correctly, Dr. Saab, what you're trying to say is that we need to be self-sufficient with regards to our basic requirements, particularly in terms of agriculture, if we want to stay safe in this heat of inflation that's going on.
That is right. And countries which have actually always, India is one of them, which has always protected its domestic market. They are facing less of a hit than countries like Pakistan, which we opened ourselves too much to the world economy. And that is never a good policy. And this, I'm talking about food, but this whole line of argument also holds for a very, very basic product like steel. Steel prices are always going up and down. So when it is going down, there is an argument that we should not be producing steel because international steel is cheaper. But then what happens when the price of steel goes up? You see, but steel is a very basic product that goes into our entire economic infrastructure. So there is an argument for a steel self-sufficiency also. So this is basically a matter of principle. That what is your principle? Is your economic principle freewheeling, liberal, neoliberal globalization where the market will determine everything? But then if the market will determine everything and the market goes down, all of us have to take a hit. But I think states must protect.
Point well taken, Dr. Kaisar Bengali Sahab. Thank you very much for being guest in our program today.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Kaisar Bengali, and he came up with a fabulous line of argument. The most important point that he made is that a country like Pakistan that has been gifted generously by the nature with agricultural resources, with enough water for agriculture, should be self-sufficient in its agricultural production. And this will help us to be independent of the international market. We would be able to meet our food requirements locally, and if our food requirements are met locally, it will give us a lot of cushion against the international inflation that is hitting all the countries, because due to the Russia and Ukraine war, there are many countries that are taking the brunt of it by not being able to pay for their food. Now, the problem with the food crisis is that when the petrol gets expensive, there would be people who would not be using as much petrol as they used to use before. But if food goes expensive, it will not be possible to cut down on your bare minimum food requirement. And this is a major reason why economists like Dr. Kasser Bengali was concerned. To join me, my next guest in the program is Mr. Ahmed Nazir. He's head of private sector engagement at STPI Islamabad and is joining me over Skype. Mr. Ahmed Nazir, welcome to my program once again. Ahmed Nazir hasn't joined so far. Another important point that Dr. Kasser Bengali made in my show is that we need to be independent on the production of steel as well, because steel serves to be one of the major metals that is required in not only production of many things, but also required to produce the machines that will be producing the industrial output that a country requires. And while we talk about the production of steel, while we talk about the agricultural process, it reminds us of the fact that Pakistan's industrial growth is primarily relying on the agriculture that we produce, because it is one of the major sources of income for Pakistan. And if you look at the export pattern as well, these are related. Most of our exports are related with agricultural products that are produced locally and then are processed, or their value addition is made through industrial process, and then these are exported abroad. So to go with it side by side, we see how all of this goes on for economy like Pakistan. Ahmed Nazir has joined me over the phone. He's head of private sector engagement, STPI Islamabad. I welcome you to my program, Mr. Ahmed Nazir.
Thank you, Shabad Saab, and thank you for joining. I hope I'm audible.
You are quite audible, sir. We are talking about global inflation, and the guest I had before you in this show was of the view that a country like Pakistan should be independent, at least in its agricultural requirements. This will be one of the reasons why Pakistan will take less brunt of international inflation. Would you agree with this line of argument?
But I think the economists, the theoretical economists, will now have to agree that some aspects that they somehow ignored, including the importance of logistics and supply chain management, as well as agility within the whole government running, was missing. And that, I think, COVID and of course the Ukraine-Russia crisis, that we have to be more agile in terms of our policies. So if I can just go on with regards to the sort of supply-demand gap that has been created due to COVID, and of course that was catalyzed by Ukraine-Russia war. These logistic blockades that were created as the supply chain disruption took place has given the world a new thought process where they have to look for alternate routes with regards to trade. And of course, when one route actually has a blockage, then automatically we need to have some alternates there. And that has actually caused the food and fuel prices to go up. And unfortunately, this has hit the developed world as well as the developing world, but unfortunately the developing world has been hit more.
The point is well taken, but you see there is another problem associated with this problem, and this is the debt crisis. Now there are many countries that are unable to pay off their debts, and the world has taken far more debts than ever before. From 2018 or 19 to 2022. We are far more indebted as planet Earth to all these major organizations that are giving loans. So if a chain of countries, like we have seen the example of Sri Lanka, Lebanon is on the verge of crisis, Laos is on the verge of a default, and the list goes on. If a list of countries goes down the chain, down the lane, how do you believe the overall economy of the world will be affected?
Yes, I think my earlier point regarding agility will actually be very important in this regard as well. Most of the companies that have been hit most hard are the ones that had very little product or service diversification in their GDP. For instance, Sri Lanka depended on tourism a lot, and of course, COVID affected tourism sector. One of the most affected sectors was tourism and hospitality. So I think this was the major issue, and this is a lesson learned for Pakistan, that we need to focus on areas in addition to our conventional areas like textile. We need to focus on more areas in all primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors, and the sustainable growth model, where we can actually use the technology that has been transferred or that can be transferred through by using the FDI that is coming in. Instead of the FDI, I think the technology is more important. If we have our own products and we have a diversified products, even with the open trade agreements we have, I think we will be good to go. But for countries like Sri Lanka, for countries like Lebanon, I think the diversification was even lower than the ones in Pakistan. So I think probably the major way forward for countries like Pakistan is that we really need to focus on product diversification. That is, of course, because just in anticipation.
I got your point. Ahad, let's move on to the last question. Now, Pew has run a survey recently of 44 major economies of the world. All 44 economies were found under immense pressure of inflation. But the worst hit has been received by Turkey. Turkey is a country that is now on record showing 54% inflation. That's a form of a hyperinflation that Turkey has recently been hit. While we understand there are some geopolitical factors associated with it, what do you believe are the economic factors that have hit Turkey so hardly?
I think the major issue is that whenever the inflation goes up, the only real solution we have is to increase the policy rate. And that policy rate makes a hit on the exchange rate as well. So I think because lira was the Turkish lira was going really down during even in 2019, if you remember. So I think the sort of measures that were taken as a corrective action to that may have caused the very high inflation in Turkey. And secondly, I think, as you rightly suggested, the geopolitical situation and, of course, the sort of situation we have around Kurdistan, and these all have their impact there. But I think we now can understand that there should be an alternate to just increasing the policy rate. We need to find other ways of handling inflation. And of course, this can be through social protection, if targeted social protection. The subsidies, again, this is a huge issue, and we need to focus on curbing the sort of subsidies that are uninclusive, and we need to focus more on inclusive subsidies and inclusive social protection, so that we can actually reach down to the really needy people.
Thank you very much, Ahad Nazir, for being guest in our program today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was my last guest in the show, Mr. Ahad Nazir from STPI, and he made some remarkable points. At the end of the conversation, I would just say that these are very challenging and very difficult economic times. As said by Dr. Kaisar Bengali in the same show, he said these crises are unmatchable to any crisis in our modern history. Also the fact that countries like Pakistan, countries like Sri Lanka, countries like all the developing countries in the world will have to change their economic models. It's a survival for the fittest. We have to break the shackles of dependence on other countries. We have to grow as much food as possible. We have to be independent in meeting our needs. We have to revive and re-strategize our economic models. Otherwise, the forces of demand and supply are absolutely ruthless. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.